Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have been invited to join your group. Although it's so beautiful outside today, I can't believe you're all inside with me, but thank you. I'm privileged to be with you today. Now, I'm going to share my screen, which is you're going to see slides, and you won't necessarily be able to see everyone. But as I go through my presentation, think about some of the questions that you might have. And at the end, we'll hopefully have some time to do that. So if everyone's ready, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And you should see my presentation in 1 second. As Sandy was mentioning, I too am new to this. Okay. Okay to go. Everybody sees my slide.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the psychological impact of hearing loss, as well as some thoughts that I have about coping strategies. Whenever I present, I love the opportunity to actually be with people, because I feel the most important part of a presentation is the questions that people have. So, and also just being able to see one another and our expressions and our faces, to me, is so critical. So unfortunately, we can't be together. I hope that in the future we all can be. This is, again, I'm going to just talk a little bit first about kind of how I came to this profession. I am a psychologist. I'm not currently a practicing psychologist because I'm the director of the Community Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing at the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center. And as director here, I unfortunately cannot see clients in treatment. However, that is my background. And I have come to this space. Let me just advance myself here. I have been in the field of mental health and deafness for about 40 years. I started in a mental health center in New York City many years ago, and came to the Cleveland area and joined the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center long ago, about 30 years ago. And I've had a variety of different jobs here, from the early days when we actually offered mental health services. We don't currently, but we did, to now being the director of the community center. Let me just briefly tell you a little bit about it. Typically, our Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center has a variety of different services and offerings to the community. The community center is just one part of a much larger organization. We obviously, as the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center, offer audiology services and speech services, but the community center is its own little unique center in a larger organization that addresses the social, emotional, to some extent, and vocational needs of deaf and hard of hearing individuals. The majority of people that we see are actually what we would be calling culturally deaf. So individuals who that are deaf typically from birth, and use American Sign Language to communicate. We do have a small percentage of those clients that we serve that are hard of hearing, but most of the individuals that we see here in our community center are what we would say prelingually deaf and use American Sign Language. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about hearing loss. And we offer a variety of things to individuals who are deaf. What I'm most proud of is that the staff, with the exception of myself and one other person, in the community center are all deaf. That was an initiative and vision of mine. I feel it's very important that deaf people serve other deaf people. And so I'm fortunate to have a staff that is deaf themselves. As a person working in the community, American Sign Language was well, third language for me, but it's my second language. It's not my first language. I'm extremely proficient in American Sign Language, but I'm not a native user, and I say that actually with pride, but with humility as well. I'm proud and humbled to have been selected as the director here, because I'm not a deaf person, but I have a lot of experience in this area. What we do in our community center is we do vocational services. So we help deaf and hard of hearing individuals find jobs. We do everything from pre-vocational, that would include helping someone write a resume, teaching them interview skills, going with them to interviews, supporting them through the interview process and hiring process, and job coaching once they have a job, coaching them so that they'll be successful in their job. And then the other piece that is really critical is we do training for agencies, businesses, anyone that hires a deaf person. We will offer training. Not everybody takes it, but we offer training so that people know how to effectively interact with a deaf or hard of hearing person. So that's one piece. We offer what's called case management services, and that would be things like support for a person who maybe is homeless and needs housing, or maybe they're food insecure and they need to have food resources in their area. Maybe they have some struggles with Social Security, and need to have someone assist them through the process of filling out applications for Social Security or food stamps or assistive technology. Many of the individuals we serve have limited English proficiency. And so they struggle with reading and writing, many of the individuals that we serve. So again, we're here as a resource for them to help them through some of the struggles of daily life. As I mentioned, training is huge for us. So we don't just train vocational people. We do things like mental health trainings. We train police. We train schools, hospitals, anyone that is interested in more effectively communicating with a deaf person. And then we are very proud in the last 10 years, actually, to have become experts in the field of domestic and sexual violence. So we have several individuals on staff who go to court with victims of violence, who will be there to support them through that process. And that's been wonderful, a wonderful addition to our services. So that's just kind of just a little bit of surface of what we do here. I wish I could ask individually about all of you all. I wish I could see you all, because I'd love to know a little bit more. We'll have to save that for in person at some point later. So let's just talk about, a little bit about some things that, when I think about the psychological impact of hearing loss, as a psychologist, this is what I think about. I think of several factors that are going to impact a person, right? I'm going to think about the degree of their loss, when they lost their hearing, the kind of loss they have, the causes of that hearing loss, and then, of course, what potential interventions or remediation can actually be helpful to that person. So for me, I think the useful part of my being a psychologist and knowing about this type of area, most psychologists don't know anything about hearing loss. They don't really know what can impact a person, and they don't kind of have an understanding of what they need to know. So I've been lucky enough over the course of my many years, this is the only space I exist in. I only work with deaf and hard of hearing people. So I'm not a generalist in terms of, well, I am a little bit, but most psychologists will specialize in eating disorders, or they might specialize in geriatrics, or they might work with individuals that have PTSD. In this space, it's all about hearing loss, but all of those things can be a factor. So I think you all probably are aware that hearing loss is probably one of the most common problems, and it's caused typically by age, disease, or heredity. There are approximately 1 in 3 people between the ages of 65 and 75 has a hearing loss, and nearly half of individuals over 75 have difficulty with hearing. Again, we're going to get into kind of degrees and such. And one of the things we know is that hearing loss that is left untreated can get worse and has significant impact on someone's life. So again, we're going to be talking a little bit about that moving forward. So hearing loss, you've probably all seen this, right? If you're in this meeting, you are most likely have know that somebody has tested your hearing. This is what we would. I'm not an audiologist, so I do want to say this is what an audiologist would use, an audiogram, to be able to evaluate an individual's hearing. Of course, when we think about degree of loss, we think about if it's in the mild and moderate range, there's going to be one kind of intervention, right? If it's profound, it's going to be different. There's also obviously things in the mild range. When you can see in the mild range, you can still hear speech and language sounds in a mild range. When you get to severe and profound, you're not hearing any language. And again, for our clients here, most of them have profound losses. They did not get cochlear implants, our adults anyway, that we work with, when they were babies, which is happening now, of course, as you know, but they didn't. So they didn't have the option of getting sound when they didn't have the option of getting speech and language sound through amplification. Some, of course, have. But again, in thinking about the impact of hearing loss, one of the things that I would always want to know is what is the degree of loss? Because it's going to make a difference on an individual's ability to cope, as well as an individual's just functioning in the world. So, see, I'm just going to move ourselves forward here. So again, when did the hearing loss begin is something, again, that we consider in terms of coping mechanisms, strategies for, managing in daily life. Did the person lose their hearing prelingually or was it postlingually? Prelingual hearing loss obviously has a larger, greater impact in one's ability to use the spoken word and to learn English easily. So I want to know about that, right, as an individual that works with that person. I also want to know what kind of loss. Is it a gradual loss, a progressive loss, or is it sudden loss? I also may want to have an understanding of the two primary forms of hearing loss, one being sensory neural, the other being conductive. Sensory neural would be most likely be a permanent hearing loss, and typically can be in the severe to profound range. A conductive loss can very often be remediated through medical treatment. So that is something I want to know. I want to know if it's a sudden loss. I would want to know whether if it happened immediately all at once in a 3-day period, you've completely lost your hearing. I would want immediately for that person to get medical intervention, because it might be something that could be remediated if caught early enough. Hopefully that makes some sense. But again, as in terms of thinking about how one can manage in the world, very often it's the sudden loss, but even a progressive loss that can really impact a person's psychological health, right? So the things that life changes pretty dramatically when one loses one's hearing, particularly if they've been used to hearing their whole life, and then they suddenly lose their hearing. Again, it impacts, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. So what else are we wanting to know about? There are lots of reasons why a person loses their hearing. One of the things I mentioned previously is age, right? Half of individuals over 75 have some kind of a hearing loss. That's pretty huge, right? Could be caused by illness, could be a genetic loss, and a genetic loss doesn't always necessarily begin at birth. A genetic loss could be something that one has acquired through a heredity, but it is something that's not going to impact them until later on in their life. So again, thinking prelingual, postlingual, if they have language in advance of hearing loss, obviously that's a lot better. Tinnitus is another cause of hearing loss, and oftentimes, I'm not sure if any of you have ever experienced it. It could be that, what you've heard is ringing in the ears, or it could be buzzing or hissing. Sometimes tinnitus, oftentimes actually, it can be a precursor to a larger degree of hearing loss. It could be the beginning of hearing loss. So very often when someone goes to an audiologist with concerns about tinnitus, the first thing the audiologist will do is give them a hearing test, because they want a baseline. They want to be able to figure out, how much hearing, if there's any loss at the beginning versus if their hearing loss actually gets worse. One of the largest causes of hearing loss for adults under the age of 65 is actually occupational hearing loss. So, and that we hear about this all the time in the news, don't we? Loud music, right? Young people wearing earbuds and blasting music into their ears. But also things in the workplace. There's hearing protection that most factories will require of their individuals, because they don't want factory noise to actually impact a person's hearing. But that is obviously environmental sounds that are extremely loud can be damaging. But even things like leaf blowers and snow blowers and things like that, where the decibel level is very, very high, can actually impact a person's hearing. So those are kind of our primary causes. So let's think about what the impact is. So what does hearing loss impact? Often, most of the time, it has some impact on quality of life. And effects can begin small, and it can then get increasingly worse. Quality of life, meaning things like feeling isolated from others, feeling frustrated or embarrassed, just not being able to experience and enjoy some of the pleasures that one previously had. Maybe it's not being able to enjoy a grandchild's voice, or being able to hear, going to their school concert and being able to hear that concert where they once were able to, now they can't. It can also have some impact on the ability to be independent for some individuals. That is another impact on quality of life. Sometimes for losses that again start as in the mild range, people have difficulty. They think that people are mumbling. They need to turn the TV up. And it becomes a frustrating experience, communication experience for both sides. It becomes frustrating for the person with hearing loss, but I'm sure many of you have experienced, it becomes frustrating for those who love that person with hearing loss, for those that work with people with hearing loss, because it's not a well understood or discussed topic. So many individuals just don't know enough about it. And so they don't know how they can actually assist. And we're going to talk about what we would hope for people to know about. The other piece that is impacted is social gatherings. Large gatherings become much more difficult when one has hearing loss. Going to a restaurant particularly that has a lot of noise, and trying to hear a conversation at a dinner table. Just a very, very frustrating and difficult experience. And it starts to threaten friendships. It starts to impact just general social interactions. Things in the safety area can be things like you once were able to hear everything. Now you're not actually picking up on things that you might alert you. Your doorbell, a fire engine, an ambulance, the beeping sound if you're working at a factory, the beeping sound of a forklift. So again, safety can, and when I say can, it can be impacted. What we do when we do trainings is we teach people, particularly in the workplace, we teach them what accommodations can they make so they don't have to be concerned about safety, because there's so many things we can do today and so much technology, which we hopefully will get into, that can assist. Just checking my time. I'm still good on time. So, the other,
Marie, this is Sandy. I'm going to give this a shot. We have a question about tinnitus. And is it okay if I ask it right now?
Please ask. I'm not sure, because I'm not an audiologist, if I'll be able to answer it, but I'm happy to try.
Yes, ma'am. All right, let me go to chat. And it says, is tinnitus a cause or a precursor of hearing loss? Sorry, is tinnitus a cause or a precursor of hearing loss? I have never heard it as a cause.
No, I understand more that it can be the precursor of, right? So that it can be an indication that hearing loss may actually, your loss might be the beginning of the sign of your hearing is going to be declining. You're going to be losing some hearing. It's not my understanding that it always leads to anything more than a mild or moderate loss, but again, that would be a much better question for an audiologist, for sure. But I know that very often those that experience tinnitus, the first recommendation for those that do experience it is get a hearing test. Go and get yourself evaluated to determine if you have already experienced some loss. You're getting a baseline, and then hopefully there won't be loss, but there really isn't, as far as I understand, a cure for tinnitus. We had an interesting, the previous director of Community Center for the Deaf was my role model and mentor, and she experienced tinnitus as a deaf person her entire life until, as an adult in her 50s, she got a cochlear implant and the tinnitus went away. She felt that was the most remarkable thing, because she was profoundly deaf, and the implant actually, quote unquote, cured the tinnitus. So that's a story for another day.
Thank you. I want to ask, there's Nicole, I think you may have just come on. Could you please mute yourself, because your picture keeps popping up on top of our speaker? So anybody who's on right now, please mute yourself. Thank you. And then I'm going to give it back to Marie.
Okay. So the other piece in terms of impact is cognitive health. And this is actually something that has been written about most recently in the last 5-6 years, where we're really paying attention and letting individuals know that untreated hearing loss can actually impact intellectual capacity, because what happens when you aren't actually if you're not treating the hearing loss, very often a person that is starting to lose their hearing denies that they really need the TV up on 50, and because again you're going to be socially isolated, right? You're going to start not participating in things. You're going to stop using that part of your brain that you used before to hear, right? So having your hearing loss treated is extremely, extremely important, because again, we want to encourage cognitive health. And one part of that is remediating hearing loss, again, if that's a possibility. So let's talk about emotional health a little bit. So the impact of hearing loss on an individual, there are many things that one can experience. And again, I've just listed some of the diagnoses that individuals with hearing loss are often diagnosed with. So anxiety is actually one that's very, very common. Depression, individuals that really do experience depressive symptoms when they lose their hearing. Stress, obviously that's pretty common. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Sometimes individuals who have lost their hearing, perhaps in teenage years or young adulthood, perhaps get social ridicule and things that then could create post-traumatic stress disorder. And things like loss of confidence, right? Those are pretty common kinds of difficulties that an individual might experience when they have loss of hearing. And again, that the ability to connect with others. We are humans. Humans want to be with. We're social people. We want to be with, and we want to be interacting with other people. That's the natural way that we are. And so when we lose that ability, or when we perceive that loss of ability, it obviously impacts our emotional health. So again, all things that can be dealt with. So what do we recommend, right, for someone who is experiencing hearing loss? And for the things that I've mentioned, we're really talking more about individuals that have had hearing and lose their hearing versus an individual who's been born deaf and has been deaf their entire life. I'm not really talking about that group of people as much as I'm talking about individuals who experience hearing loss, perhaps later in life, or even in middle age, or even as a teenager where they used to hear and now they don't. So, but obviously, what are we recommending? The first thing, of course, is to get professional advice through your ENT, your audiologist, or again, another specialist. Because we want the person to be educated on what all the options are, because the better educated that we are, the less of an emotional impact hearing loss is going to have. The less it's going to impact our quality of life if we're educated and we have options. So, what are some things that are often recommended for individuals that have hearing loss? There are lots. We are so fortunate today to have technologies that can assist people, things that never existed before. The chat feature, or the voice recognition software on our phones that can be so very helpful. Caption telephones that that actually, provide captioning during a phone conversation. Obviously, sign language interpreters are plentiful. So lots of technologies that exist today that didn't exist before. The technology for a deaf person who uses sign language, there's tons of things that we use, like video phone versus a CapTel that you see here. A video phone is actually a phone that is a television screen where you can see a person signing, or you can see the interpreter who is signing to the deaf person. So it's just amazing technology that exists today that is really very helpful in helping a person to decrease the impact, the impact of quality of life. So another, things like alerting signals, a doorbell that flashes. You can see here on the screen something like a video doorbell where you can actually see the person. Captioning has been cart captioning for meetings. This system here that you see on the screen is called an Ubi Duo, and that's just technology that one can use. It's like a teeny little computer that people can type back and forth in a one-on-one meeting, and your message actually can be voiced as well as seen on a screen. So again, technologies have really helped us to be able to manage and to decrease that impact that hearing loss has on quality of life. So how do we, what are some of the things we do or we suggest when we're talking about hearing loss? So I mentioned before about education. And it's not only educating ourselves, but it's also educating others. But the only way we can educate others, if we actually can recognize that we have a hearing loss and that we can talk about our hearing loss. We want to be advocates for ourselves. And that would be if your hearing loss is mild or if you have profound loss. So self-advocacy, that is all about letting individuals know what you need as an individual with hearing loss. How can another person help you to be a part of a conversation? And this is really, really critical, whether you're, again, a person that has a mild loss and uses your voice, or you're a person who's profoundly deaf and uses American Sign Language. That piece of letting others know who you are and what you need and being able to accept that is really critical for one being able to cope better. So things like telling a person, please face me when you're speaking. It helps me to see you more clearly. I want to be able to see your face. I need to see your mouth. We often do this in our trainings, is that we don't want hearing people, and I say that kind of because that's the kind of language we use in our community center for the deaf. There are deaf people and there are hearing people. So we tell hearing people, don't shout. Shouting is not going to help. It's going to distort your mouth. For a deaf person, shouting is not going to help. You're just going to look kind of foolish because the person can't hear anything. And shouting is just making you look like you're angry versus it's not going to help them hear better. Sometimes, obviously, increasing the volume of our voice will help a person with hearing loss that uses a hearing aid or a cochlear perhaps. But again, simple things like the person with hearing loss paying attention to additional visual signs, paying attention to facial expressions and gestures. All of those things help us in terms of getting the full message. And I think the other piece that's really important is letting others know when you haven't understood something or haven't heard something. It's so easy to just nod along and pretend that we are hearing something when we haven't. And we don't want to do that because, again, that's going to just make you feel like, well, I don't really want to go there because I can't, nobody includes me. We have to be able to advocate for ourselves. And I think that we all know that being able to say to someone, hey, you know, it would be so much better if we met at this particular restaurant because this restaurant has less environmental noise. It's just the acoustics in this restaurant are better for me. Or I'd like a table in a particular location of a restaurant because it's better. I want the lighting to be good. You know, all of those things we should never be shy or embarrassed about letting individuals know that that's what we need, because it's not only going to be helpful to the person with hearing loss, it's helpful for the person that doesn't, because most people are actually very empathic, understanding individuals. They want to know what to do, but very often they don't know what to do. So again, self-advocacy, huge, huge, huge. So other things for coping. So to be honest with you, the coping strategies that we use to manage stress and anxiety, it are kind of across the board, can be helpful. So really just things like for a person to de-stress, what are some of the things that we do, right? For some, it's a hobby that they can actually do just to help to keep them on an even keel. It might be mindfulness, meditation, or prayer. Again, those kinds of things are coping strategies that when we're experiencing anxiety or stress, we want to be able to have things available to us that can help us keep our stress level down. For some, it might be, you know, leaving a situation and just taking a few minutes to collect their thoughts to determine, okay, what do I need to do next? People, you know, as I mentioned, hobbies, exercise, and also recognizing the environments that are difficult and not necessarily always avoiding those environments. You know, as I mentioned, in a restaurant, you know, why not pick out what a better restaurant is? But, you know, sometimes, you know, you have to be in that situation. Finding those strategies, finding those accommodations that are going to be helpful. And again, for those that are still in the workforce, those kinds of accommodations are very, very essential for a person to be able to be fully 100% integrated into their job. So I'm going to keep going here. I didn't want that slide. Sorry about that. Let me see. I wanted, okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is actually some communication strategies, but I actually want to talk about some other things that are pretty important in terms of communication. And I realized that I neglected one slide. Leave it to an old person who is technology impaired to always include my most up-to-date. But again, what do I want to tell you about? I want to tell you about, in terms of communication strategies, things that we mentioned, being in a place that you know where hearing is going to be easier for you. We talked about speaking a little more slowly, but also in terms of, very often we want to maybe reduce a lot of visual stimuli, because what we really want to focus on is we want to be able to focus on a person's face and mouth, and be able to be in a place where there isn't a whole lot of distraction going on. We want to make sure, as I mentioned, that there's good lighting and the room is set up. And that the other piece that, and we do this a lot in our center, just as a general practice, And this can happen in any work environment where we set up communication rules, which include things like making sure that we are signaling when another person is talking. It could be just as simple as just coming up with strategies that work so everybody can be included in a meeting, and that we put those communication rules out at the beginning. So things that we would want to consider for accommodations for an individual. Again, for many of you, you may no longer be in the workplace, but for those that are, the things that we consider all the time are the kinds of things that are needing to be accommodated, right? So for some people, it might be an ASL interpreter, but that's not necessarily an accommodation that everybody wants. Maybe they want a cart captioner because they would prefer to see everything and see every word and read it. For some, it might be a loop, an audio loop. For others, it might be the use of microphones or headphones. PowerPoint is very useful because again, it's a visual cue, and reserved seating is another accommodation. Typically, if we were hosting a large presentation, for example, and it was open to both deaf, hard of hearing, and hearing individuals, we would reserve seating for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, so they can clearly see the captioner. They can clearly see the captions from the captioner, can clearly see the interpreter. But other things are, sometimes we need to make accommodations in terms of size of a meeting. The number of people communicating. We don't want people talking over each other. We don't want people, we don't want people to interrupt, things like that. So these are just, again, some things that we consider in our, as we accommodate for individuals both in the workplace as well as in just life. So questions. We are about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. I would love to be able to stop sharing my screen so that I can have an opportunity to see as many of you as possible and to answer any questions that you might have. Hold on a second.
Yes, hi. My name is June Pritchard. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. So anyhow, I just want to say, what's your name again?
Maria.
Maria. Thank you so much, Maria. I learned a lot. There's a lot of things I didn't know, and it's just really nice to meet you. I think you're a lot of fun. And and I want to say, as far as I don't have a question, but I just wanted to make a contribution to something that you said that was really wonderful, as far as helping the hearing people to be able to communicate with me better in a group. And that's my favorite thing about one of my favorite things about the cochlear implant is that I'm able to communicate in a group, and it's just a lot of fun. Not every time, of course, but there are certain times where I'm in a group and I'm able to communicate. It's so much fun because I just love to be with people. And so I have found a way to control people. It's so wonderful. When you're deaf, you got to learn how to have power and control. So I've learned how to control people in a group so that they pay attention to me, being able to hear what everybody's saying, and I'm able to control them so that they don't speak over each other. And the way I do it is through my mini mic microphone. And whoever is holding the microphone in the group, it gets to be the one to speak. And it has so much power of control over the conversation. Everybody just focuses on who's talking. So everybody's paying attention to who's talking. So they, and nobody interrupts them. And then when they're done, somebody's like, oh, they raise their hand because they know that they can't talk unless they're holding that microphone, or June's going to miss out. And I mean, aren't I a lot of fun? Would you want me to miss out on a conversation in a group? No, June's going to miss out. So they patiently wait until the person says what they have to say, and then they take the microphone, and now it's their turn. That way, I have complete control over not the conversation, but I'm on them to be, so that they make sure that I understand what they're saying, so I don't miss out.
June, that is so fantastic to hear. Just what we talked about, right, is when we are assertive and we are advocating for our needs, it really, really helps. And as you said, that, being in control is really important, because when we have lost some hearing, it doesn't feel like we have control. It feels like it's everybody else, and it's me as like this person that now can't do what I used to be able to do or appreciate things. Or so that is one of the most important things, which is why it was in bold, was advocating for what you need. It's so critical to emotional health. It just is. And and the other piece is how great, and isn't it true that individuals want you to be included? They don't want to exclude anyone. That's not who we are as people. We want people to be included. So it's when a person with hearing loss can get up and say, this is what I need, please do it. I think sometimes the hardest place is in the family, because people forget. And actually, the other piece is people forget a lot. Even I sometimes forget, and I've been in the field forever. And don't be embarrassed to remind people of what you want and what you need. But I think families have such a difficult time, but if we can help to educate our families as to what can they do to help out, me, grandma, Uncle Joe, cousin Tim, and remind people in those gatherings, don't forget about me, don't leave me out. Please repeat. If I don't want, the worst thing we can do to a person with hearing loss is say, I'll tell you later. That's just demoralizing. It's a terrible thing to do, right? It's just awful. So, it should be taboo in every family. Never let somebody in your family say that. Tell me now. I want to know now. Everybody else knows now. I want to know now. And again, we don't want to be rude or be angry, but Stephanie, you have a comment.
I have a question. I've had some encounters over the years with city council meetings in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm going to out them because they have been egregious and it's documented. When you go up, and I'm looking for some tips, I'm not looking to have everyone shame them.
Right.
Have at it if you'd like to, but that's not the objective here. The scenario is that the city council sits at a dais in the front. Behind and in front of them is an audience. If someone comes from the audience to speak at a podium, that person is required to speak facing city council.
Right.
So when I step up to speak, and P.S. the acoustics are bad, very old building, high ceilings. They have used microphones, which has improved it. But in spite of that, those of us in this community know that amplification at a distance with a microphone is louder mumble jumble. It does not enhance speech comprehension, speech clarity, which is the core issue, not the volume.
Correct.
So picture this. You're sitting, and P.S. it's largely an aging population that represents their constituents. So we have, by the data, a hearing loss resident in that audience in significant numbers. So people are seated behind me. I step forward to a podium to address City Council with a microphone. They're speech reading the back of my head. Okay? I have, kid you not, on multiple occasions, turned to the side to speak so that the people who are my kindred spirits in the audience have speech cues. And I have been by City Council in public reprimanded and told I must face them. Even when I explain what it is that I'm doing, that has been done.
Wow.
It is a big wow. Someone actually wrote an opinion piece to the newspaper about it. So it is not, if it were a one-time situation, or if this were me not understanding the dynamics. I've been through the Gallaudet 2-year peer mentoring program, and I've lived with my own hearing loss for decades and have had a cochlear implant for 12 years. I know whereof I speak from understanding educationally that issue and as a consumer with that issue. So now I'm asking you, any clues about how to not anger an ignorant City Council body? Because I've tried multiple things and they're bad. Their behavior is bad.
Well, we obviously know there are laws, right? And we never want to use the law. In my feeling, I don't want to come at anyone with that first.
Yes.
There's no question about that, because that puts people on the defensive. When the first thing we say is, let me tell you about the law. But that is something that is behind us, right? It is something that we can use if we need to. One of the things that we have found, I know that we've worked with Cleveland City Council on the accommodations that they need to make when it comes to meetings, right? And they've been pretty receptive. Again, starting off not so receptive until they get complaint after complaint. We've been successful here as an agency being able to write a letter to address those particular needs of the community and the accommodations that would be helpful to individuals. But the piece of that helpfulness is also what is required. And for them to know, we're happy to, again, finding an affiliate agency wherever you are that can back you up, and then be able to kind of be your support. I know there are many organizations that will legally take up this fight. Right, Laura, you're shaking your head.
Yes,
because you know that.
Yes, and thank you. I like what you shared about a letter coming with the power of force and credentials that an organization would have that I do not wield. Interestingly, just to give you an evidence of how recalcitrant they are, there was a time when I actually got them to have a screen. It was a hugely important meeting. And there was no hearing accommodation because they had to move out of the building. There were no microphones. It was horrific. So I actually had captioning come in, and there was a screen behind the dais. So anyone in the audience saw what was being said. It was perfect.
Right.
It was a golden moment. When I stepped forward in that meeting, invited the audience to say, how is this going for you? And got a collaborative groundswell. But do you think they would allow that or repeat that performance? It's a matter of this.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have required people like me, I can require in advance, several weeks in advance of an agenda that is not already published that I can't know about. I can require captioning for a meeting, okay? Remember, the public, people like me, don't know there's a meeting that I want to attend in enough real time to meet the burden of proof that they require that this be arranged 2 weeks in advance because of cost considerations, which are understandable. Believe me, I get that dynamic, okay? I have had captioners come in and sit with me, but that only helps me. And when they do that, I have to sit there and look at their screen beside me and miss everything else that's happening, which isn't the captioning experience I'm after. And it doesn't help any of the audience that would be helped by projected captioning behind city council, so
Right.
that you look at them, speech, facial cues, and you see captioning, which is going to lag and not be perfect. So the combination of those are what people use when they watch TV and movies with captioning.
Right. Jay made a comment in the chat box, Stephanie, and it's so true. It really is a violation of ADA. I mean, it's a blatant violation of ADA. And, you know, again, city council, they have to. They don't have any options, right? They really don't. They have to be accessible, equally accessible to all, just like.
Quote, ADA requires reasonable accommodations,
right.
which is the leverage point about you ask for it too late, it costs us too much, it isn't reasonable.
Yeah, I know, but again, I think that there are, again, hopefully ways to fight it. But I think when we come at it as, let me give you some options, that again, doesn't have to be extremely costly, but it is something that people always go to. But what does that do? And for them to recognize, what does that do to a person with hearing loss when you say, that's too expensive? What you're saying is that I'm too expensive and I'm not worth it, which is a horrible message, isn't it? It's a horrible message. So that's not the message. Is that the message that you were intending to give? Because that's the message you just gave. So I think when people start to personalize it, you know, what would you do if it was your mom, your sister? What would you do if it was your brother? Is that how you would want it to be? And they always will come down to, no, you wouldn't. You want the person. So why wouldn't you do that then for the general community, right? That it's not a big deal to make those accommodations. Again, the other piece that we do when we do training is we talk to nonprofits and for-profits and government services. Put accommodations in your budget. You may not need them. You might have money left over at the end of the year, but if you budget for it, it's there and it's not a financial hardship because you've already planned for it. So doing some pre-thinking, and it kind of should be in everybody's budget, because it's, look at our population. We are all aging. What do we know about hearing loss? We know that it's going to impact half of us. So, you know, put it in the budget.
One last comment, and I will give up to other people that have issues, I realize. There's a bit of a catch-22 because people do not come out to city council meetings because they can't understand what is being said. And because they do not come out, city council uses that as a hammer to say, there's no need. The need isn't present. The people aren't here. The people aren't there because the hearing environment is so atrocious.
That's right.
Okay, so I just offer that. And if I and others can have an intelligent, thoughtful, well-documented, substantiated conversation. It has to include things like that basic catch-22 reality check. Why is your audience not here?
Yeah. And we deal with that all the time, Stephanie, with regard even to agencies that say, well, you know, but no deaf people come here for services. Well, to your point, they don't come because they don't think that people are going to honor and respect what they need for an accommodation. And so they just don't go. They report less to the police. They don't go to the domestic violence center because they think, well, they do now, but because they think it's not accessible to me. Why should I go? I'm just going to be demoralized. I'm going to go to the police station and they're going to make me write stuff down and I need an interpreter and it's going to take them, you know, till tomorrow to get one. So forget it. I won't even bother with this. So that happens all the time. But, you know, again, if we put hearing loss and deafness on people's radar screen, they think about it. So we want to be front and center. We want to be out there all the time, advocating for equal access to information, communication, and that is all about providing hearing, whether it's, you know, hearing devices, or accommodations, sign language interpreters, cart captioning, all of those things. So I'm totally with you. I don't know how you all, I see another hand up. Dave, please, love to hear your question.
Yes, thanks for your presentation. I just wanted to bring up tinnitus. I had sudden hearing loss about 6 years ago. They felt it was genetic and due to my occupation. So I've had my cochlear for 6 years, and I still have severe tinnitus. As a matter of fact, I was going to, when I first went to the audiologist, I remember mentioning to the nurses that I have bad tinnitus, and I'll never forget what they said. They said, well, you're just going to have to learn to live with it, which is the worst thing you could say. But anyway, I got steered to Dr. Scott B. at the Cleveland Clinic, who was a psychologist. I saw him up to the COVID situation, and he's helped me a lot. What he's told me is, well, first of all, going in, there is no cure for tinnitus. There is none. So you got to realize that straight up. The cure is being able to deal how to cope with it.
Yeah.
That's the key right there. And he's helped me a lot. And it's funny, the only reason I bring that up is he had mentioned mindfulness too. Mm-hmm. And that you mentioned that in your presentation, but it helps when I have a cochlear on one side and a hearing aid. It helps when I have them on, but when I take them off to go to bed, the tinnitus goes up. But I just wanted to make that comment. Tinnitus is a tough thing. It's a tough thing.
It is, particularly because there isn't a remedy. Right. And that it is all about finding ways to cope with it, which can be very difficult because it really is so distracting. It's painful. It's painful. It's just painful to have it. Right. And it's extremely fatiguing in addition. So I don't know if you find that where it's just when you can't actually, perhaps aren't in doing mindfulness stuff or whatever, and it can be extremely bothersome and fatiguing. So it is. I'm so glad that you were able to address it. I so support what people do, that to be able to kind of come forward and say, yeah, let me talk to someone about this, versus oh well, that's my life and it's horrible and and I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm kudos to you, Dave, for going forward and actually working with someone. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
So I feel like I'm over my time and intruding on your opportunity to have your chat. But I'm
Maria?
happy to answer any other questions if there are any. Let me just see if I missed
This is
anything.
Sandy. Hello. You're not over your time. Anybody who wants to leave is able to leave. And so if I would like to entertain anybody's questions, but I actually have a comment to make. I worked in the corporate America all my life, and I'm retired now, and I was severely impaired for at least half of it. And I would find myself in staff meetings with 10, 12, 14 people around a big, long table. And it was just hideous. Now, I had a lot of assistive learning devices, and they helped immensely. But my strategy was to be extremely to make my requests of others, saying it would be so helpful to me if, this is before the meeting, it would be really helpful to me if you did not talk when someone else is talking. And I know when we get excited, we do that. And there isn't a staff meeting I've ever been to in my life when that didn't happen. And sometimes I felt I could interrupt and say, oh, wait, Ed, just a minute. Could you let Marcia finish speaking? And taking that kind of, not very aggressive, but clear, like, just a second, Ed, could you finish? And people were not offended by that, but it takes some guts to say that, it, as things are progressing, I remind people at the beginning of the meeting, everybody shakes their head like you're shaking your head, and they're all ready to do everything they need to do to help me, and they forget. So sometimes intervening, but doing it in a very kind way, and always reminding them that you are really helping me out when you speak up, like somebody with a real small voice and they're 8 feet away. So, would you mind, Marcia, just speaking a little louder? It'd be so helpful to me. And when I used words like that, I got a lot of cooperation. So
It's so true, Sandy. Such a good point. It really does. It really does and can work. And having those communication rules. Judy, you wanted to say something. Oh, are you agreeing?
Hi. I'm an office coordinator at the University Hospital, and I just want to say that when I'm scheduling patients, I work with the hearing impaired. When they tell me that I'm speaking too fast, that lets me know that you are hearing impaired or you're using the caption phone. That really helps so that it doesn't make the caller frustrated or the patient gets frustrated. So letting that person know up front makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. It definitely does. And communication rules in a meeting is so beneficial. Really, as somebody I don't remember if Stephanie was saying it or someone else, again, most people really actually appreciate it. Not just, we even in our own board of directors in the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center, one person might request captioning, but there are actually several other people that really benefit from it. Even if it's just 1 or 2 people that like it or want it, or no, it's not about want it and need it, but other people really benefit. And so that, I think, like, as I mentioned before, sometimes it's easier to make those changes in a work environment. Once we educate people in a work environment, it's harder to do it in our families. But I say it's equally as needed in a family, maybe even more, to remind everybody at Thanksgiving dinner how we include everyone in our dinner. and not, whatever the situation is. So again, I think we have to empower individuals with hearing loss and deafness to be able to feel good about saying, hey, don't forget about me. I'm as important as you all are. And it really will reduce that significant negative impact that hearing loss has. So that's just real to me. I think it's, again, I really appreciate just the opportunity to even say some of these things, because I hope that all of you found it somewhat useful. It was my pleasure to have been asked to come today. And I'm happy to have all of these new friends and family, right? So I'm sure that someone on this call, I know Laura for sure, because Laura and I know one another, but feel free to reach out for, we are here. We do a lot of advocating for equal accessibility to communication. So it is still something, despite ADA being, around for almost 30 years now, we are constantly needing to remind people of what is legally required. And it's sometimes easier when you need a sign language interpreter than when you need a CART captioner. And it's sometimes easier to say, I'm a person who's deaf and I use American Sign Language versus, well, I'm a person that uses English and I use my voice. Oh, you're not really deaf. Yep. And I need these accommodations. Yes, I am. We find sometimes it's more difficult when a person uses their voice. We've even had deaf people that will say, you know what, I'm not going to use my voice because people don't believe that I'm deaf because my voice is clear. And so I'm sure that we could probably go on for another 3 hours, right? And talk about these things.
And one thing, Marie, could you, is there a way that maybe put in the chat your email address? Is there some way that,
I'm going to do that right now.
You? Okay, so she'll be putting her email address in the chat for us. Do we have any other final questions or comments for Marie?
Yes, Margaret.
Okay, we're trying to unmute. I want to get back to the person that Dave about tinnitus. Years ago, there's an audiologist here locally. I live in Worcester, Ohio, so it's south of me, that an audiologist told me a tip about tinnitus. It's called, well, it's going to be backwards for you. Let's see here. It's going to be backwards. It says lipoflavonoid. You get it at CVS, Walmart, one of the drugstores. Don't follow the directions that come with this. The audiologist told me for the very first month, I had to take 3 a day, three pills a day, 1 at breakfast, 1 at lunch, 1 at supper. Then the second month, you take 2 a day, pick breakfast and supper. And then the third month, and for the rest of your life, you have 1 each day. So I take mine in the morning at breakfast. I have very little tinnitus anymore. It has worked wonderful for me, but I don't follow the directions that are in the package. I followed what this audiologist said. If you need me to repeat that, Sandy or Shirley Ann knows my email address.
Wow, Margaret, I've never heard anything that worked. So that worked for you. Dave, give it a try. See, can't hurt. But that's wonderful. That's great to know that worked for you. Fantastic.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
June has another question, I
Yeah,
think.
I have a question. Yeah, when I go to the grocery store, my particular grocery store is, the cashiers, thank goodness, are very, very protected from the public. There's like a wall that is like, it feels 9 feet tall. And then to the side, they added more walls to the right and the left, more walls. So, and they also have their mouth covered. And before that happened, I was able to give them my phone and let them talk in the text to talk. But now they are so protected that that's not a case. So, I mean, what is there to say to them anyhow? I mean, I miss them. Some of them I got to bond with and we had a lot of fun with. But anyhow, does anybody have any creative ideas on how to communicate with somebody who have that many barriers?
This has been a real struggle this last year and plus, for so many reasons, but that in particular, the masking, the distancing, the barriers, all of that. I think I understand that people are nervous. I think hopefully we'll be getting less and less nervous as we all are, we have most of the population vaccinated. And people will be less concerned about taking their mask down. And I think we'll probably be having masks for a while, but maybe not as concerned about being able to remove it for a short period of time. Or even, knowing now that touching things is not a way to get it. And so maybe phones, being able to use the phone, soon will still be an option. But the only thing, one of the things that we recommend to some of our clients is just to keep some paper and pencil in your purse or in your pocket. Just to say, if someone doesn't understand you or you don't understand them, I have hearing loss, could you write this down? Or you write it down, or just, again, I think to alert
I forgot
people.
about that.
I know
That's
it's
great.
And actually initially we had clients that would go in for hospital appointments and they weren't allowed. So they couldn't write anything there. They would then bring their own pencil and their own paper because they couldn't understand anyone with
Nice.
their mask up. And they were now having, they were being directed places and people weren't even using visual gestures to
Yeah,
help.
I love it. Writing is great.
But anyway,
I love it.
it's
Thank
just,
you.
again, hoping that that things are going to calm down with the vaccination, and that we will. How long will it take us to get back to normal? Gosh, I don't know. Just seems like it's going on forever, but it has been really, really a struggle, and has increased isolation as a result, because people are just giving up. Like, I don't know what else to do. This is just, so it's been tough. It's been tough generally, but I think people with hearing loss, it's been horrific. So
Yeah, I totally forgot about writing. So thank you so much. I'm going to do that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, June. Anyone else?
well, thank you everyone for having me, for giving up this beautiful. I see it coming in my office window. Looks pretty nice out there. I think I'm going to take a walk. And I'll jump off in case you all have things that you need to do. But thanks again for having me here. It was my pleasure, and so great to see your faces. Someday in person. So thanks to all of you. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful,
Marie.
wonderful
We
day.
really
Thank you, Maria.
appreciate you being here. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Okay, I think if anybody has anything that they're interested in saying, we should keep ourselves mute unless we're speaking. And you can click up in the right corner gallery view so you can see a lot of people's faces. Is there any other business we need to conduct or anything that you would like to add before we close? All right, that sounds, listen, I do want to say thank you so much to Judy. Judy Leverett is also from the, put that face in there, girl. She's in that, she's, as she said, from University Hospitals, and she is sitting in for Lindsay today, who had a family problem. And so we're really thrilled, Judy. You helped so much getting the meeting started and making me less nervous as I learn this process. And so I'm going to say, join us next month. Let me read the topic. We have a brand new surgeon at UH who is going to speak to us next month in May, called Single-Sided Deafness and the Cochlear Implant. And he's very excited about meeting us. So hopefully we'll see you all